It's the All Birdies, No Bogeys podcast, your weekly disc golf analysis podcast right here on JomezPro. I'm your host, Brian Earhart. My co-host, Nate Perkins, joins me again. And it's still the offseason. It's not over after 1 week. We got more off-season content for you. And Nate, I'm so excited for this one because we've talked for a long time. We were so excited to get past the tournament reflections. I think maybe at one point we'll go 2 times a year to do a tournament reflection and then a fun episode. Now we just get to do the fun episodes this winter, and we've met so many people along the way that have blown our minds, whether it's a long conversation at night during tournament week with someone you met along the way, or it's someone that you hop on the phone with and you riff for hours at a time. We have one of those people in your life coming on the show to talk disc golf. And from what you've said, I haven't met him yet. Fascinating individual. Who is he and how did you kind of meet him, Nate?
All right, so I was in New Zealand a few years ago, and one of my good friends down there, Simon Feasy, he's the creator of RPM discs and the RPM Helix basket, which I think is one of the best baskets out there. He's also just like one of my best friends now. He's in his mid 50s, just a rad human. And he was telling me about this guy, Brian Weissman, who had created this method, and Brian asked Simon to help him with some of the videos. So he showed me some of these videos, these instructional videos, and I was kind of intrigued by it. I was like, okay, haven't really heard anybody talk about this certain way to explain the disc golf backhand drive. And it was not until the following year in New Zealand, I was at Simon's house again. And Simon's like, hey, Brian Weissman's coming over. He lives in Seattle, but he's coming to New Zealand just for vacation. And as he's describing him to me, he also gives me a little bit of his backstory, right? That he created this thing in Magic the Gathering called the deck, and it was like used globally. It was like the leading deck
Like strategy.
configuration out there at the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, it was like the number one strategy for many years, and just how impressive that was. And it led him to video game development, and he co-created this game, The Path of Exile, which is just a really, really complex multiplayer RPG
I've
style
played it.
game. Brian Weissman goes on to sell this game for like $300 million to this Chinese company, Tencent. Like, literally just strikes gold with this IP. And, so Weissman is like, this just giant in this video game world. And also, he's been obsessed with the disc golf backhand throw for like 25 years, apparently. So I meet this guy and I'm like, okay, this is just, you just don't hear about this every day. There are just not too many people that, get to the top of one field and are also obsessed with this like random niche sport. So I meet the guy, and he is so excited to talk to me because he specifically would reference my form, Brian, because of how not sound it was and what I was
Oh,
doing wrong.
no.
So he would be teaching people like, okay, look, Nate Perkins, he's 1018 rated, and look,
Oh,
he has
God.
no brace, and he opens up his brace and he's like, do you want me to tell you how to do it? And I'm like, well, I've got to say, I understand that my form is not sound, and it's actually why I had to retire, because I got to 1020 with my very average form with no brace. I'm opening up my hips and no power. I'm throwing 55. And I'm like, I understand what I'm doing wrong, but it's translating it from the field to the course. And then the guy starts talking in depth with me about algorithms and how to like rewire the brain. I'm like, okay, now we're on the right track here, because I've never heard anybody talk about the things that we know there's a missing link there. Like, when you learn disc golf as a kid, all those algorithms are like in sync, right? You learn it when you're 25, it's just not going to work. So the guy was fascinating. He was glued to my hip. I was really intrigued by him. We're playing around a disc golf. We're talking about life. We're talking about cryptocurrency. He's talking about how Magic the Gathering is like an indicator of genius out there, and how all these different people, Elon Musk, like the OpenAI guy, like all these AI people, they started with Magic the Gathering. Anyhow, he is one of the most interesting people that I've met in the disc golf space. And recently, I've gotten him on the phone and had great conversations with him about what kind of legacy he wants to leave behind with this method and with coaching in general. So I am thoroughly excited to have Weissman on this podcast. And I imagine it's going to be a little difficult to keep him on topic because of how excited and how in-depth he gets about disc golf. But nonetheless, can't wait to unpack it with him and see what he has to say. And let's get to it. Mr. Brian Weissman, welcome into the All Birdies, No Bogeys podcast. First, I'd like to say it is an honor to have you on the show. I've met a lot of people that are well-versed in disc golf backhand technique, but I have to say that you have impressed me the most out of essentially everybody that I've spoken to. Yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge on backhand technique, and I think it's going to tie in perfectly to the series that Brian and I have started about the evolution of the backhand technique. We just did Paul Macbeth last week. We plan to have several other players on, but I think that your insight on the backhand drive will help educate our fan base, including myself and Earhart over there. So I'd love for you to start by introducing yourself, giving us a little bit of your background, which is also quite interesting, and then let us know how you got into disc golf in general, and specifically what fascinates you the most about the backhand technique.
Thank you so much for the incredibly gracious introduction, Nate. It's hard for me to talk even with the camera to you, so I'll probably move around.
Oh, that's all right.
That's a perfectly framed question with an extremely long and complicated answer. I think begin by saying that there's an expression I'm fond of repeating. I'm sure many of you have heard it before. It is that madness and genius are separated only by degrees of success. And I am by design, by nature, an obsessive person. I've been a scientist and an obsessive scientist since I was a little tiny child. That eventually led me into a career of sorts as a global thought leader in Magic the Gathering way back in the early 1990s, before there was even an internet, at least a modern internet. And I earned a reputation in Magic as a global thought leader, which in that group of people was an upper echelon of individuals, objectively. The people that were playing Magic in the early 1990s were, if you look at the span of their careers, what they've gone on to do, they have sort of crushed the world in a way. I'm actually in the process of developing a documentary about it. But wow. The contacts that I made from Magic led me to the game design space, something that I'd always done as a kid. And eventually it led me to co-founding the company that makes this game, which an astonishingly large number of people have heard about now as a consequence of all the crazy shenanigans around the sequel. I was a co-founder of Grinding Gear Games, a company that makes Path of Exile, in 2006. One of the 4 people involved with it, although the period of time that I was actually really working on the game was from 2006 to 2013, 14, roughly. So a lot of that has been kind of left in history. But in the background of my involvement in PoE, there was always another thing, a thing that everyone in my family knew that I was totally obsessed with, because whenever I was in their company, I generally did not talk about Path of Exile. Instead, I talked about the backhand.
Yes.
In 98, I was introduced to disc golf. I had played Ultimate Frisbee in high school. I was an avid Frisbee player. I even played for the Slugs for about maybe half of 1 quarter at UC Santa Cruz. And then I realized that Ultimate Frisbee is actually very hard and has a military structure surrounding it. It wasn't like the fun version of the game that I played in high school. And conveniently, just a few years later, a friend of mine showed up at my door and he handed me a golf disc. I think it was made by Innova, and my guess was it might have been a Polaris. And I flipped it over and looked at it, and it was so different from a Frisbee. You know, it was like way smaller in terms of diameter. It had a different density. And you could just feel like it was designed to be hucked a long distance, which is honestly what I loved doing when I played Ultimate, because I could throw farther than almost anybody who played Ultimate. There was only maybe 2 guys who played on the high school team that could out throw me. And we were all kind of competitive. We could literally throw the entire field. And I'm like, this is amazing. This feels just like the Frisbees that I love to throw. I'm going to go play disc golf with my friend. And I went out and I played my first round ever at I think it's called the Evergreen Open Space. It's in Goleta, right next to Isla Vista in Santa Barbara, which is where I was living at the time. And I threw my first drive and it went like 120 feet in the air, dead, like at a 45-degree angle, and arced over the tree and went like 75 net feet. And I'm like, what the hell? I went and collected it and went back and threw again, same result. And I threw and threw. And by the end of the day, I had figured out that if I tugged on the nose really hard and bent my back backwards, I could get the thing to spin and arc out and plane and land maybe like 180. And I considered that day a success. And I played in Santa Barbara for a couple of years. Then I moved up to Davis, California. And I played at this tiny little park called the Woodland Park, I think, in Woodland, California, just north of Davis. I played pathologically every single day. I would make the drive in the boiling sun to go throw. And I would throw and throw and throw, trying to get better. And it was this weird, intractable problem. I had done all of these things in my life where I threw time and energy at what seemed like a complicated problem. And every single time, even if it was Magic the Gathering, which was this crazy, emergent, incredibly, infinitely complicated game, I found a solution in Magic in like 3 months and built this essentially Magic meta-defining deck called the deck that defined how people understood and played Magic for the next 4 or 5 years until other archetypes evolved. If you've ever played Magic, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I could not solve disc golf. And by the time the early 2000s rolled around, I started to see emergence of form. Like YouTube didn't exist, but there were ways to get videos. I bought a VHS tape of Scott Stokely's form. It was like an instructional video. Have you guys seen that?
I haven't.
Brian, have you ever seen that one? VHS tape?
I've seen the VHS tape itself. I haven't had the VHS player to put the tape in, but I have seen the cover for it.
So is that some of the first disc golf technique videos? Is Stokely on VHS, early 2000s?
Yep. As far as I know, I saw it in Santa Barbara, and my guess is I left Santa Barbara. I was there from 2003 to 2007, roughly. So it was a 4-year block. And yeah, I lived in Davis where I was playing in Woodland, and then I moved to Santa Barbara. And I kind of jumped back and forth between those two cities. But this would have been probably 2004, somewhere around there. It was pre-YouTube for sure. And as you both know, I'm sure YouTube didn't initially have disc golf content on it at all. It certainly didn't have instructional content. In fact,
sure.
Literally one of the pieces of disc golf instructional content was made by this very, very early YouTube kind of version of Masterclass. It was called something Village. The first part of the name is eluding me. But they paid all these supposed experts to go and demonstrate how to
video.
You've seen it. There's a guy out in a field. Here's how to throw a backhand, guys. Oh my goodness. At the end of the video, he literally throws the disc, yanking on it with his arm, just about the worst mechanics you could ever demonstrate, and throws it straight into the ground, like 20 feet in front of him, off camera. And he turns to the camera, and with no sense of irony, he goes, "That was a great throw." Like he's trying to sell it. And they printed that and put it on YouTube. So I'm clicking through early YouTube, as you can imagine, in the early 2000s, trying to get better. But I did have this one moment that was transformational to me. It happened at the Evergreen Open Space in 2004. They held the first really organized, it was probably a B-tier event from there. And of course, a B-tier event in 2004 was very attractive to all the players that were propagating down in SoCal. And you've met a bunch of them, I'm sure. Particularly most prominent among those two and apparently these guys were both ranked in the top 5 in the PDGA at the time, Steve Rico and Bobby Music.
Yeah.
Good call, you got him. Sorry, I didn't let you guess. I should have let you both guess.
That's okay. That's all right. We got
Steve
one.
Rico and Bobby Music come to this event. And I've been playing at this point for 5.5 years, grinding pathologically, throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. And I'm capped at around 230. I cannot understand how to throw even 1 foot farther. I've seen people on the course who seem like gods because they can throw 300 feet, and I don't understand what they're doing. And when I watch Bobby Music and Steve Rico throw, I've talked about this a million times. It was like literally watching a person walk on water, like watching an actual miracle. That's how it felt. I'm like, oh, that guy's just walking across the beach, and he's walking onto the water, and he just keeps going. It seems so impossibly inhuman and magical that I needed to understand it. I mean, I'm just like, I play the sport avidly. What am I even seeing? I watched Bobby Music throw a drive that when he let the disc go, it hissed through the air. You've all heard it. And if you've never been to watch people play live, you need to do it. Because no matter how amazing the Jomez coverage is, and it is beyond incredible, and I can attest to this because I've spent time walking around with radar and rangefinders, watching them film it. It's like a symphony. It's incredible. There's nothing like watching these discs thrown live. It's just, there's a scale and energy to it that you cannot understand on video. It's something you really have to appreciate. So I saw that for the first time, and I'm like, what am I even
So
seeing?
that's 6 years into your journey. And, I actually didn't know that it was more of a personal quest for you. I kind of thought that you were a bit more fascinated with just the mechanic outside of your own quest, but it's your personal journey that you're on. You're 6 years in, you see Bobby Music, you see Steve Rico. And at that point, you feel like you also want to walk on water. So would you say that like seeing them is kind of what like locked you into this path that you've been on for 27 years now?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question. Thank you for that. Because honestly, the way that I relate to understanding something that feels fundamental and important is that the purpose of knowing that is to communicate it and share it, honestly. That's my approach. It's exactly what I did with magic. As soon as I had the solution, I didn't just hide my tech. I hid it locally because those are the people that I competed with. Nobody competed outside of their little ecosystem, but people in Europe, people on the East Coast, they should know this. It's important because it just sort of lifts the whole space. So I think that I looked around me and I saw that nearly every person who loved this sport with a passion, man, woman, child, old, beginner, someone who's been playing for 25 years, that everybody had this in common. Everybody wants to throw farther. It just makes the sport more fun. And it's more than just scoring birdies. It's like insanely invigorating and empowering to watch your body do something like this. It's certainly awe-inspiring to see other people do it. It feels beyond Olympian. So that was the goal, honestly. It was like, understand this in my own body. I don't even have a PDGA number. I've never even gotten one.
Wow.
It's never been about being good at the sport. And honestly, I never wanted to compete because I fundamentally knew I was bad at it objectively. I did not understand it. It didn't matter how much time I threw at the activity. I just wasn't doing what Bobby Music and Steve were doing in front of me. So I was determined to understand it. And
well, let's fast forward a little bit, Brian, because I want to know when, because we've all experienced those plateaus with our speed, right? Like you get to that 230 mark, you're skying the disc in the air, nose up, and then you kind of break through and you get to that next plateau. You're throwing 300 feet, like you saw a couple people at the Evergreen Space do, and then you're throwing 400 feet. And for a lot of people, they get to that space and they can absorb as much YouTube content as they can, the off arm, the brace leg, everything, but they're still stuck at that plateau. So I want to fast forward to the point where you really learned and how and what you learned to be able to get to a place where you are able to get an average disc golfer to really start zipping the disc 60 plus miles per hour. Because that's what I think is the most fascinating, is that not only have you physically mastered it, and you would say that your technique is is sound in every frame if you play it slow motion, but your ability to coach the average person to be able to rip the disc. So I want to fast forward to the point in your journey where you learned how
All
to
right.
translate that.
Okay, I just have to preface it with one thing, and thank you for keeping me on task, because I'll definitely meander. There was one critical moment here. It happened that day that I saw Steve and Bobby throw. I went up to their group after the tournament was over, and I demanded a lesson. I'm like, please teach me. Oh my God, the
No
story.
way.
It's like the Doctor
Yeah.
Strange moment in Doctor Strange. Please teach me. Oh my God. And a guy named Chris Brophy jumped up and said, hey, I'll teach you, man. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
No way.
Super nice guy, totally willing to teach, just awesome guy. And he runs over and we have a lesson. And he goes, oh, you can't walk that way. I was crabbing sideways, kind of just shuffling my feet sideways the way I threw an ultimate disc. And he goes, no, you got to do the X step, man. Step behind and in front. And so I copied what he did. And he did it basically like Scott Stokely. So I copied that, and I immediately threw the disc like 100 feet farther than I ever had. I threw it over 300 feet for the first time. And I'm like, proof of concept. All I have to do is grind this. This is it. This is the way to the promised land. And off I went for the next 23 years, 24 years, repeating the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Honestly, indistinguishable from insanity. And to answer your question, madness and genius separated only by degrees of success. Success finally came in 2023. And it came in a way that, in retrospect, totally makes sense based on what I've learned since about how people understand kinesthetic behavior and how much of what you do in your body is algorithmic and how little control you actually have over those algorithms. Because what constitutes your consciousness, for the most part, is just a series of subroutines that govern your behavior. When my hands are waving around like this, I'm not thinking to do this. This is all algorithmic, like conducting a symphony of my voice. When I reach to pick up this microphone, I don't think about it. It just happens. And when you go to throw a disc using your dominant arm, in the same way that you've used your dominant arm to do a billion things in your life, writing, reading, driving a car, eating, talking on the phone, whatever, you can't stop the same algorithm from playing. And that algorithm compels you to begin to pull on the disc hard before any other part of the kinetic chain can add to the throw. You see everybody doing this instinctively on the first day that they play disc golf, usually. They run up, and the first thing they do is they wind the disc behind their body. Why are they doing that? They wrap the disc entirely behind their left shoulder, because all of their algorithmic intention is, oh, I've thrown a Frisbee before. This is how you do that. Or I've seen somebody throw a Frisbee. This is how you do it. And the problem is that they've done that too many times. The part of their brain that governs that behavior will not relinquish control. It's the dominant side of the body. And this is the reason why I was stuck for so long. I could not get my dominant side of my brain from running an algorithmic loop. There was no way out of it. What I figured out was that if I made the beginning of the sequence an intentional thing on the other side of my brain that was sequential to the entire system, it began a new algorithm, essentially a clean slate that I could layer the biomechanics on top of. That's really how it works. It's brain hacking.
Well, how do you hack the brain in that manner? Are there steps that you're able to articulate to your to the folks that you're teaching to use the other side of their brain?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. It generally comes down fundamentally to figuring out something that's native in a person's kinesthetic system, if I could call it that simulates the feeling of the brace sequence, and it begins on the left side of the body. The left side of the body is correlated to the other side of the motor control center. Your brain is two hemispheres, left and right. This is a very simplified explanation. I'm sure if there are neurologists or neuroscientists, they're going to be like, God, Brian's so stupid. He's simplifying it. But basically, you have
Always an
these
expert.
two lobes at the back of your head, which are your motor control center. It's like if you fall and bang your head backwards, you get vertigo, sometimes permanently or worse. And the right hemisphere governs the left side of the body, and the left side governs the right. Nearly everybody is handed. They are either left or right-handed. Apparently it's 90 to 10, something like that. And your brain is always trying to be hyper efficient. So what that means is that after a little while, you develop handedness in one side because you can do everything you need to do with one hand in the world. You don't need to be ambidextrous. You're not a lemur where you have to brachiate around on trees. You can afford to be handed. So that's more efficient. So you are. And the problem is that the dominant side of the brain becomes algorithmic to the point where you can't get anything to intercede. But the left side of your body is controlled by the right side of your brain. And it's basically a clean slate. If I could demonstrate, you can't fully see me here, but if I stand with all of my weight on my right leg and I do an intentional thing on this side of the body, this is what began. Honestly, just twisting this leg internally with all of my weight on my right heel, kind of like pivoting, almost like I'm shimmying. This is what I demonstrated in Method 1.0. Does not produce a throw. It's not even a thing you do. But what it does is that it gets you beginning an entire algorithmic sequence on the left side of the body that adds, in a way, to the brace. It makes you feel the brace for the first time. By shifting this, you make this foot and this leg the focus. That's all you have to do. And while it's hard to sometimes feel that in a person, there's a drill you can do. I'm simulating it right now that almost anybody can do. I had Ian Anderson do it right in front of me at the Portland Open, and he's like, yeah. And then he stood up and went, wham, and hit the disc perfectly. Because it's exactly the same weight shift, and almost anybody can feel it. Hand locked here, hand locked here. Make the broom push hard into the ground. Guess what? You have a perfect weight shift. So
and that rewiring is what's really, really fascinating to me, because I don't think that there's many coaches in the space yet that, because it's one thing to have the technique down, and it's a completely separate thing to be able to articulate it and help a student understand it, especially as they progress in age, right? I've coached hundreds of people, and the older they are, the harder it is to get them to break their old habits. So
oh my God,
this is what I think is fascinating that you are tapping into, is actually trying to rewire and to use different parts of the form to get them to understand it and to shift. And so the next thing I want to ask you is how, let's say a professional disc golfer wants to get from 1020 to 1040, and I'm kind of I'm thinking to myself a bit here, because I plateaued 1020 mark, and I was like, okay, I need to change my form, right? My brace leg is opening, and it's not really working. Like, how possible do you think that it is for a professional who has taken the throw to a certain degree, and then to then rewire everything and to get back to that same level or better? Or do you think that this technique is specifically for someone that hasn't really learned the game much and doesn't have like years of habits?
God, that is honestly a perfect question. It relates to my own kinesthetic system exactly, and something that I've had to relearn myself, because in that crazy, 20 plus year period that I was trying to understand the backhand, I played a ton of disc golf, and I was objectively a high 900s rated player. I think if I had tried to compete, whenever I played against people like, Simon Feezy and I went up to Kayak Point, and we went like toe to toe over 18 holes. I shot 13 under on the red course, which is, like a 10.05 or 10.10 rated round. I wouldn't be able to do that every time, but I did I shot like 3 under par at Blue Lake on the pro layout. Like I wasn't bad at the game. But for the reasons I explained, I'm like, why bother to compete when I suck at it? It's just like, I know I'm just bad at it ultimately because I don't have the right biomechanics. So I have learned this myself. I'm almost 51. I'm going to be 51 in 11 days. And if you look at my form objectively, you can definitely put it in the video. Play that at any speed. It gets better the slower you make it go. Your form is pretty damn good when you can't take a bad picture of it, and when you slow it down, it looks better. It keeps looking better and better the slower you get it. So I've learned those mechanics as a 51-year-old. So what's the consequence of that related to your question? What can I do with it? It comes down to your goals, honestly, because there are world champions who have thrown the disc like 60 miles an hour. When Owen Scoggins won this year, how fast does Owen Scoggins throw a backhand? 50, 51 maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
I've seen it clocked, but you don't always know if you're getting an accurate result because it depends on the alignment of the pocket radar. You have to be in perfect alignment with the ejection. If you're off by like 4 or 5 degrees, you lose a lot of speed. So you don't know if the ratings are realistic, but Owen throws in the low 50s. At a certain point, what matters is, can you control the disc? Can you hit lines? And of course, as Chris Taylor would say, can you putt? And Owen is like the best putter, right? So it depends again on what your goals are. But I'm really firmly of the belief that outside of the fun component of just being able to throw the disc farther and with more control, the correct biomechanics allow you to do unimaginable precision with the disc. You can do the kind of stuff that Simon and Paul do, which is impossible without the linear force ejection in production. It doesn't work because even if you're close to correct, if you look at Kristen Tatar's form, for example, Kristen is very, very aligned. Everything is good in her form except for one fatal flaw. The disc is swooping when she's pulling it towards her body. It comes way in the frame here, way up.
Yeah.
By her head for just an instant. What is the consequence of this? If you think about how you're trying to produce linear force on the disc through the whole swing, hugging on its energy here and making it a perfectly straight line the whole way down to ejection, right? If you waver off that in any way, if you're now pulling towards the ground, all the force production is angled downward for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have to redirect it back up to get it on plane to try to hit your line.
Losing some energy. I think we actually have a Kristen video up to Tosi. Is it possible to play that one? Let's see if we can see that swoop right here that you're talking about.
It's very apparent in the Anthem Films video I produced. We'll see in this one. You see the disc coming up,
there it is.
Up. Now it's good again. So,
and Earhart, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on changing the plane like that, the way that Kristen does? How much energy do you think she's losing right there?
I can't necessarily say how much energy, but when it comes to optimization, yes, there's optimization that she can do. But at the end of the day, the thing that I gathered from Kristen following her every single round for a couple years pretty much is that in disc golf, if you have the release point dialed in, your equipment perfectly, you don't need to be optimized to win tournaments by many, many strokes. You have to be good under pressure. You have to be good at competing. So I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into on tour is like, oh, I have to get better and better and better with my form. But I don't care. I always joke in disc golf, your form could be unbelievable and you could still get beat by the drunk guy at your local course with 2 discs and a Ziploc bag and a 6-pack of beer. Because they know those discs better than anybody, and they know the course better than anybody, and they're confident in themselves. So,
oh my God.
You're right. When we look at these slow-mos, like we're going to watch in Calvin and Ricky and all these players that let the disc kind of rise up to their back shoulder,
Conrad,
they still do so much right that it doesn't matter. Like, can Calvin throw 79, 80 instead of 74? Maybe, but he's
Yeah.
built his whole life around that throw. His release point, his timing, the discs that he chooses to throw are built around that style of throwing. And do you think Calvin's sitting there filming himself like, oh, I got to fix this? No. So with Brian, I love listening to someone like theorize because it's fun for me and it gives people something to sink their teeth into, especially people learning the game of disc golf and trying to get from 0 to 70 rather than some of these pros trying to get from 80 to 88 in a certain category. So I love listening to this, and let's actually break down a few more videos. Speaking of Ricky, there's another great Anthem Films video, and I know you've studied so much, Brian, and I'm having a blast listening to you talk. I'd love to hear what you like about the way Ricky throws the disc, and I think the left side is really pronounced in this video that Tosi has for us.
All right. Do we want to? You want to pause, or do we have the ability to pause? All right.
Oh yeah,
Ricky's insane. Obviously, the
This
guy
is
can
sick.
throw. I've seen him throw 77 miles an hour right in front of me off the tee without really running that fast too. And I'm sure that if he competed as a distance player, he could definitely throw 80. He's an insane crusher. What he does is it relates kind of to what Brian was talking about, that every player, except for maybe a handful of people, although more nowadays, is some example of hyper specialized inefficiency. And Ricky is an example of that. I think that to address and answer that final point about what is the correct strategy, it fundamentally comes down to your goals, really. And for a player who's already successful at 1030, they're probably not losing those 10 other points because of a lack of driving power. It's probably something else entirely. It's probably a lack of touch game, or it's impatience with putting, or it's something, right? It's not a differential of 50 miles per hour. If you're already really good at the sport, you probably should just continue being good at the sport, because fundamentally birdies are awesome. Simon Feasey is fond of saying that, right? What are we doing at the end of the day? We're just trying to get birdies out here. So whatever your strategy is, if it gets you lots of birdies, it's probably not worth destroying it and trying to rebuild it from scratch. That's what I've had to do over the last couple of years. And boy, have I had my ass kicked by drunk guys in the park. Like I can outdrive everybody at North Park who plays there at the course in Seattle by like an absurd margin, except for maybe one or two players. And yet I would be like worse than a 10-1 underdog in 18 holes against any of them. Like they would destroy me on the course consistently. I'm objectively bad at it, and my mechanics are, a work in progress too. So even when you figure out the perfect linear biomechanics, it is going to take years to learn how to do everything that like Simon Lizotte can do with a disc, for example, to learn all those nose angles or anything. You're going to be so bad for a long time. It's like going from a straight ball to a hook in bowling or something. You're just going to suck for a long time.
Brian talks about bowling all the time. So let's go back to that Ricky video, and I want to hear what you think that he's doing right, and what are some things that you think Ricky is doing different than others.
Okay, so the right. Pause for a second. This is really. Can we go back like a half a frame? Let's go back. Go back a little more.
This Anthem stuff is great.
Okay, perfect. Pause right there. I want to direct the audience to one of the things that Ricky does better than just about anyone. One of the fundamental things you are trying to create, and it's funny that the X step is called the X step. When I was taught the X step, it was a big step behind. You can't see my feet, but it was like, X.
Yep.
Look, my body's forming an X with the ground, right? And then I'm going to go completely backwards, plant with my feet in opposite directions, and spin this way to throw. That's not why it's called the X step. It's called the X step because your body forms an X of offset, of elastic wound up offset between the lower body, the brace of the lower body, and the coil of the upper body. That's what everyone's taken to calling it.
Yeah.
You need to create this point of resistance with this leg to coil against, to resist you, to create an elastic wound up system. Ricky does that so unbelievably well. You can just see the coiled energy in his body. It's so evident. And that huge offset
That off arm.
in his upper body is thrust and wound straight into the ground through his right heel. He winds his entire body into that brace point and then adds to it by opening up his right hip violently using his right quad, pushing through the heel to raise the right hip up while simultaneously stopping the left side to create a wall of bracing energy, isolating the right leg and the left arm. And the only thing moving is the throwing arm and the lever to eject the disc. Everything's stopping at once. Ricky does it so perfectly, winding up everything into it, down into the ground. Wham!
So I've got a question for you, for both of you guys actually, and it's something that I haven't fully wrapped my head around, and I've heard some players talk about it in the last couple seasons. Is in this frame specifically, is Ricky manually ejecting the disc? Like, is Ricky letting go of the disc, or is he ripping into the disc, and because the disc has so much force, it is coming out of his hands? And in this frame specifically, I want to ask that question, but how often do you think that players are manually letting go of the disc versus it ripping out of their hand? Erhard, I'll start with you on that.
My thought on that is that it's a spectrum, and I think the harder you throw the disc, the more it's going to rip out of your hand. And I think the closer you get to the basket, the more it's going to feel like you're manually throwing it, because you don't need this trebuchet of a structure to eject the disc out when it gets to a certain point. You know, Matt Oram told me like 2 years ago that he wants to be a hand player most of the time, which to me I translate to, if he can just manually snap his wrists and get the frisbee to the basket, he's going to do that. He's not going to have to use all of the structures of his, kinetic chain. So that's my thought. If you can get
Yeah.
close to the basket and play frisbee on the beach, do that. But the farther out you get, and yeah, you're going to let it rip out of your hand. That's kind of my thought on that. Brian?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect analysis. It's exactly what I would have said as well. Essentially, at a certain point, you don't have willful control over when the disc is coming out. And the differential between willful and automatic is very blurry. The way I describe it is when you're throwing at full power and your only intention is to eject the disc to go essentially hyzer flip or straight as far as you want it to go, there's a battle for supremacy going on between the strength of your grip and the energy in the disc. At a certain point, the disc wins. You can't hold on forever if you do it correctly. And so the stronger you can grip the disc in this position, once you're imparting real leverage to it, with biomechanical advantage, the longer you can hang on to it, the better. I certainly feel like the disc is coming out of my hand automatically, but I can't tell the difference between my brain perhaps letting go a little bit at the end. Maybe it's just happening and I don't have any understanding of that. So I think it's a mixture of both of those things. If you notice, Ricky opens his hand up after he lets the disc go. He does it with his forehand. He goes, wee, with his fingers up like this in his forehand. Wee. And you're like, what is Ricky doing? He doesn't do that. And the truth is that's just some bizarre thing that he's learned afterward. I think Ricky probably, on a shot like that, is probably building pressure into the disc that's perfectly proportional to how hard he needs to hold it until it pops out where he intends it to pop out at, right here. So sometimes that's a tight grip, sometimes that's loose and building and then releasing. Sometimes it's hard and then soft. It's like, it depends so much on what you're trying to achieve, right? And once you're closer to the basket, you are holding on to it, but it's fundamentally just about predictability than anything else. You know what I mean? I think both strategies work really, really well.
So Brian, I want to ask you a question as we kind of get back on topic, because the reason you're here is the obviously you and Perkins made a connection early on, and he really wanted to get you on the show. And the other thing is this method that you referred to multiple times. We haven't even really talked about the fact that you've invented a way of teaching disc golf, and I'd love to kind of zoom in on that and obviously it's free, so people can go out there and watch your content. This isn't a sponsored ad. We just want people to come on and talk about how they teach disc golf. And in regards to the method, how would you sum it up to the people listening that maybe haven't seen it before?
Wow. Okay. It's changed a lot in the last 2.5 years, to be honest. I made a video at the beginning of the series, and basically to answer the question in a broader sense, in 2023, I had this epiphany, this sort of eureka moment where I suddenly felt a true brace for the first time. And I felt like what the brace was intending to do for the first time. And it laid the foundation for what has become a basically 3-part holistic teaching system. And when I say holistic, it means that it addresses essentially everything in your body, because everything is involved in the backhand. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard to learn. So the teaching system was a first video that taught the remedial thing. And honestly, I didn't know anything when I made that first series. I ironically made a video in it called Parts of the Elephant, about that famous proverb about the city of blind men and the elephant, about how I had all the understanding. And honestly, I was totally wrong. But I had the spark. That was the important thing. And I built on that in a second video. And I now am planning to make a final video series, part 3. And from start to finish, it's designed to basically address the fundamental problems that waylaid me as a player for 25 years. Mm-hmm. The idea that no matter how many videos I watched, no matter how many coaches I listened to, no matter how many lessons I got, I never could get even 1% better. It's like nothing made me better. I could not get past this block. And I really, really wanted to understand it, because there are a lot of people who don't have my athleticism, who want to enjoy the sport at a higher level, but they can only throw 250. What if they could throw 400? How would that transform their enjoyment of the sport? Or 450? So the video series is designed to communicate that understanding as best as I can express it. And I've gotten way, way, way better in the last 2+ years in terms of both my own holistic understanding as well as my ability to communicate and articulate it. And honestly, I've not been alone in this. I've had the help of a bunch of other people who are amazing coaches in the sport. There's a renaissance going on in the teaching right now that did not exist, I think, until really probably the pandemic, and the growth of the sport really kind of made it important.
Who are some of those people that you look up into the scene right now that are really teaching sound fundamentals, Brian?
Totally. It's a really interesting story. Honestly, it's been an extremely humbling experience for me, particularly based on some of the conclusions that I made 2 years ago, when I really thought, I get this. I finally figured it out. What I had figured out was one way to understand the biomechanics, one way to get to them from the ground up. But there are, in fact, 2 totally reasonable ways to go about teaching the mechanics. You have to understand the athlete that you are teaching. And the people who have kind of come at it from the other direction, their names are Clint Easterly and Nick Crush, are 2 of the most prominent people, in my opinion. Clint Easterly lives up in, very close to me, actually, in a nearby city. And we met and hung out and stuff. And honestly, when he appeared on the scene, I was like, I'm not buying it. Because he's saying you can throw the disc really hard by just focusing on the upper body. How much does that sort of violate the orthodoxy of the sport? We all understand you got to use your legs, man. You got to get the hips in the throw. I've been told that for years.
Right.
But it depends on who you are. It depends on what your athletic instincts are. Clint is a big, muscular, incredibly explosive powerlifter with a long history of doing explosive, almost plyometric energy production, throwing huge amounts of mass from one spot to another using the kinetic chain all in sequence. To someone like him, the idea of literally just getting in a strong position and wailing on the disc got him to 79 miles an hour.
Really?
He can throw it.
No orient, but his hips have to be oriented in the right direction, right? He's not facing his toes forward and ripping it.
No, it's standstill.
It's standstill. Yeah. He's one of the hardest standstill throwers in the world. Right. He can throw 77 miles an hour from standstill, which is like incomprehensibly insane.
Yeah, but I feel Like because Stokely was doing this for a while too. He was like telling everybody, don't focus on your hips. Don't focus on your hips because it becomes this complex thing. And yet when he would throw, his hips would be oriented in the exact proper position. His front foot would be as slightly in front of his back foot, his toes facing away from the target. So that's all I mean. It might be he's just focusing on the upper body, but the lower body has to be in a sound position to be able
That
to
is
have
that is
leverage
100%
against
correct.
it,
And
you know?
that's exactly right. Yeah, and Clint's weightlifting background, his powerlifting background, got him into extremely strong supportive positions with his legs. So his legs were like concrete, while his upper body just wailed on the disc. But again,
Wow, 79 standstill.
77 standstill, 79 with an X step that he's learning. I'm sure he'll be able to throw over 80 with more practice.
Yeah.
And Clint learned how to throw the backhand, I think, starting in 2020. I think he started playing around the pandemic. Maybe he played a little bit before. I don't want to, misrepresent him. There's another guy that just competed at USGDC. Sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were going to ask a question.
Oh, no, go on. No, for sure.
His name is like literally, his last name is Crush, Krush.
Yeah, Brian, you know this guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I know both these guys. Clint was also at USGDC distance. He threw like 526 standstill.
Spoilers, wow. Yeah. I mean,
he doesn't know who won, so we can't. You still don't know who won that one, right, Brian?
I do not know.
Hey, it might have been a crazy headwind. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, that's a story for another day. But doing distance competitions in a controlled environment or outside of a controlled environment has just too much variance for my taste. But
sure.
Anyway, Nick Crush has thrown an 87 mile per hour 360. Self-taught. He started playing around 2011 or 2012, but he really got back into it during the pandemic. And he's become an extremely established thought leader in the backhand. And Nick was more upper body focused for a long time, although unlike Clint, he actually was doing footwork before he really started to take deep dives. But these two guys, alongside work done by Chris Taylor, who is the brother-in-law of the great John Kirkland. I don't know if you guys have met Chris Taylor. I guess he runs the distance. Legend, right? Chris Taylor and I had a bunch of conversations a couple of years ago where I was super, super arrogant, honestly, in retrospect, because I really thought I had figured it out. And he's like, Brian, there's all this other stuff going on here that you don't understand. And ultimately, he was totally right. I believe that Chris Taylor and Nick were and Clint all talked together, in various avenues, either Facebook, Discord. I'm not privy to it. There is another guy in the background though, who is kind of like he's sort of like the Yoda in the whole story. And his name is Andrew Gregos. He actually lives out in, I think, Virginia, or maybe in Maryland, and he has been making these videos on YouTube. His YouTube name is Seabass. Have either of you guys ever heard of Seabass?
Another legend.
Good. I'm glad Brian knows about him. It would make sense you know about Seabass. Seabass, to me, he's kind of like the OG. He's the guy that basically taught my mentor, Lee, who was one of the collaborators of the Method videos. But Andrew figured out the backhand. He was actually a competitive, very, very competitive swimmer in college, I think. But he had an incredible sports understanding. And so he started learning the backhand and he figured it out. So he started making these videos, like 15 years ago, a long time ago, like near the beginning of YouTube, that were objectively the best instruction. But to me and my understanding, I couldn't get them. Like it just made no sense. There's a quick sort of analogy that might resonate with some people in the audience. Imagine somebody walks up to you with a big bag, like a huge Santa sack, rattling around, and they say, hey, Brian, pull a puzzle piece out. And you reach inside and you pull out a piece and you see a little bit of blue and red and pink, and you set it down. And you look at it, and then eventually you put it back in the sack. And a couple of days later, you pull another piece out, and you keep doing this for like 5 or 6 years. And eventually the guy with the sack says, Brian, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. What's the whole puzzle? What does it look like? And you're like, I don't know, a sailboat? And he goes, no, it's Richard Nixon. How did you not figure that out? That's what Andrew's videos felt like to me. It was like just tons of little puzzle pieces. None of them, I knew that if I could click them all together, it would make sense. But there was no way to learn that way at all. So Andrew's incredibly important. I actually asked him to collaborate on the method videos because I thought, I'm like, dude, you are the OG. You kind of taught everybody the way. But he wasn't really that interested in participating. He didn't, reach back out to me. But I consider those people essentially my teachers in the other part of the sport. I mentioned Lee before, who's my collaborator, and then another person who I really, you guys would totally love him actually. His name is Sebastian. He's also in the method videos. And I met Sebastian here in Seattle in 2020, and he had self-taught his way to 83 mile an hour backhand. He could throw an 83 mile an hour backhand, and he didn't even have particularly perfect form because he was an elite level decathlete. And in college, he was, I think, an All-American actually in the indoor heptathlete. And like James Conrad, who apparently came from, I think he was a triple jumper in college. That's at least what the wiki said when I did my video on him. If you have certain instincts in athletics, you can learn how to do the backhand. Another person who's a great example, Chris Taylor's protege, Disc Tay. Have you seen? You must have seen her throw recently.
Of course.
Taylor, she can throw 72 miles an hour. What on earth, right? Amazing stuff, right? She's a Chris Taylor protege. Yeah, he taught her how to throw that way, as far as I know. That's unbelievably insane, right? And who knows, what ultimately the potential of this sport is. The method is, certainly I'm going to talk about this a lot in chapter 3. I will talk about my mentors in this space, and I will invite them to do their own videos, to appear in the videos. I happily would have them be included. It's such an exciting thing to be a part of, because for 50 years, you really could not learn the biomechanics unless you either were an elite tier athlete with some similar sports, like a heptathlete, like Tay, or if you learn the sport as a child. Mm-hmm. There was no way to come into the sport as a 25-year-old, even if you were very athletic, or 30, and figure your way, and even close to the biomechanics.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. And it really brings up a question, a couple of them for both you guys. So what we talked about earlier, how you can get away with not having good form if everything else is bad. In the future, do you think that there will be more convergence at the top, and that there will be less room for people to have errors in the form because of how advanced it's going to get? Similar to, I watched a little bit of the World Series last night, and people have different forms when they're swinging the bat, but for the most part, it all kind of converges, and it's really tough to get away with like having sloppy form because the margin for error is going to be so small. And I wonder if disc golf will always be that place where the drunk guy who's got sloppy form can still like play at the top, and players that have, quote, sloppy form like unknown Scoggins will be able to golf their way to victories? Or do you think that in 30 years that disc golf is going to be much harder to reach that upper tier with, big, kind of errors in your form? What do you guys think, Earhart?
For me, it reminds me a lot of chess. Like you read a lot about how chess was before AI and like chess computers and stuff like that, and how everybody kind of had their own style, and it was like a beautiful era that they would call it. But then, the coming of chess computers, people were starting to solve chess, and it kind of changed the way that people approach the game and train for the game. And and a lot of grandmasters say it kind of killed it, killed the beauty of it, I guess, in a way. But in disc golf, it's not just the way people throw that will dictate how we play the game in the future, especially at the top level. What kind of courses are we going to make the players play in the next 5, 10, 20 years? I think that's going to have a huge deal with it, because I think you're already seeing players say, I'm tired of just constantly throwing as hard as I can. I want to be able to shape the disc. I want to show off my intelligence and my versatility with the disc. So I think if we can find in the future, as we continue to grow as a game, that beautiful balance that like a Tampere Disc Golf Center has found with like technicality and power, I think, yes, we're going to see convergence at the top, because if you have a nice blank slate, you have beautiful, clean, fundamental form. Yes, you're going to be able to throw, top level shots consistently. And I'm also seeing it with juniors players. Like, now that the YouTube era is starting to be here with these juniors players that are growing up watching the best players in slow motion, you already see it. The off arm is starting to engage with like 7-year-old kids now. They're starting to have beautiful, you know, um, and I think naturally we'll always progress in that way. And people like Brian, people like Chris Taylor, people like all these online coaches that are dedicating their time to teaching, of course it's going to converge at the top. But I think there's always going to be room for individuality and self-expression in this game. And I think it's also up to the course designers to make that happen as well. That's my thought. Brian?
Yeah, I think I think Earhart bringing up the course design aspect is really important, right? Because when we bring in more technicality to a course, there it opens up more room for less convergence at the top, because there's so much more style involved in throwing the disc slow, in shaping it. And when we force these players to throw it, as fast as they can, then they're kind of forced to approach like perfect technique to be able to keep up with everybody at the top. So I do think course design is going to be a really important part of the sport, because for a while it felt like we were losing the touch aspect of disc golf, which for me was one of the more elegant aspects of the game, like in seeing how different people threw the disc straight at slow speeds, or threw the disc on a turnover, how they got that to happen. So I do feel we will be seeing less and less of I call them like the skateboarder like archetype, like the Greg Barsby winning in
Yeah,
2018 Worlds, I think
that's
is a
such a
great
great
example of
descriptor.
someone like he has great form, right? But
Oh
he
my
has
God.
so much style too, and he brings a unique flavor to the game, does Owen Scoggins with her world title this year. I think we'll be seeing less and less of that over time, but I hope that it isn't the case, and I hope that we will always be able to have people that don't necessarily have perfect technique be able to compete at the top level.
What you said reminded me of Paul's interview. Actually, he specifically talked about this, and the way that he spoke of it, I could hear the kind of mournful quality in his voice about it. He's like, it's just the way that the courses feel now is different. There's a different selective pressure going on in disc golf right now. That selective pressure at the moment, I think, is pointing towards not just perfect biomechanics, but incredible force production too.
Mm-hmm.
And at the heart of it, honestly, is the same thing that ensnared me, I think. The idea that when I first saw the pro biomechanics, it was like a magical, ethereal moment, kind of the ultimate embodiment of novelty and meaning at the same time. Like, this is extremely important, and it's very novel. And I think as the sport is continuing to grow into the mainstream and bigger events are being held, and people are now taking the time to travel long distances to attend events and stuff, which I think is pretty unprecedented, more and more people are going to be exposed to that novelty. It will eventually wear off, inevitably. At a certain point, watching people smash the disc a mile, you kind of get, you just kind of get numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure like Ian Anderson, for example, has lost like a lot of the awe for just watching the disc. I've been by Ian tons of times while he's filming. What actually impresses Ian is exactly what you were describing, touch and sculpting, because Ian has seen long drives a million times. So I think fundamentally it will evolve back in the other direction. The problem is that the pro biomechanics, the perfect linear force production that you see produced by Gannon, for example, is just better evolutionarily than the Barsby form. It's better than the Matt Bell form. It's better than the Luke Humphreys form, and yours, for example. The people that are still hanging on doing with a more rotational quality to their force production. It's just that it's just better. So eventually, I think there will not be space for the people that throw that way, at least not at the elite level. I think everybody will throw the same way. But at the same time, imagine, what if everybody on the card was Paul Macbeth? Like all four people could do what he does. That's the most exciting disc golf I think anybody could ever watch, because it's such a perfect blending of spectacle and precision. Paul Macbeth could throw the disc like 80 miles an hour, right? He said he could throw 80. I've seen him throw 76 on a radar. So he's not lying.
So I think as we kind of wrap this conversation up, I love what you're saying, because I've thought about this exact same thing. 4 Paul Macbeths or 4 Gannons at this point. That's
Totally.
incredibly entertaining disc golf. It'd be quite the battle to have players that can make any shot happen at any time. And what it comes down to again is, what is the course challenging them on? What kind of chooser's paradox can we give the players? Because that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, it then becomes a game of chess. It comes down to decision making. Who's going to blunder at the wrong time? And
Totally.
then who's going to take a risk that they shouldn't take? And is the green built in a way that tempts the players and puts them in those pressure situations? So yeah, I'd love to see all players get to that point, but I also want courses, again, I'm going to harp on this, I want them to continue to challenge players in creative ways to make them use their brains and not just use these algorithmic movements, like he was saying, to eject the disc out there, jump putt from 200 feet, and then get themselves a birdie and move on. I want them to sweat, and I want them to be put in situations where their fight or flight comes out, and they have to be resourceful in a moment of pressure. And I think it's been pretty fascinating to watch the game evolve from a throwing standpoint, even since the Pro Tour started. Like, we're seeing so many young players come up. I think of Cadence Burge right away. She's out here, teenager, hot on the scene, wins a tournament. Instantly, you're like, oh, okay. There's the off-arm driving down. There's a great hit point, and there's a laser beam hyzer flip instantly from a teenager. So I remember Kyle Klein coming around and being like, okay, this kid's shaping a disc like he's been playing for 20 years. And I think we're going to continue to see that. In Finland, we're going to continue to see great European players come up. And we have people like Paul Macbeth, inspired by the European design, coming over to the United States and doing the exact same thing with the gigs that he's getting. So I'm so excited for the future of disc golf from a gameplay standpoint. And I think we have people like you, Brian, continuing to educate people and passionately show people that there's more to this game than throwing it 120 feet up in the air and crashing it into the ground, which is a spectacular shot, actually. When I think of 120 feet up in the air, that is quite the spike hyzer.
No, it didn't go that high.
Ripping it.
120 feet. Probably
you painted an incredible picture for me.
Actually,
But Brian, I want to give you the floor as we kind of wrap this up to share with people, what are you excited about right now in what you're doing in disc golf, and maybe just disc golf in general, where we're going?
I talk about this a bunch in the method videos, actually, about a whole bunch of the things that make disc golf unique among the sports. You think of all the popularity that traditional golf has, and that it has 100-year history. But in terms of things that impart, again, those two critical components of novelty and meaning to keep people captivated, disc golf is in a special echelon, in my opinion. It really is. I've seen golf live, PGA ball golf. Pro disc golf is so much more impressive objectively than pro golf, because you actually can feel the energy in the disc. You can experience it. The way that your whole entire visual system alerts to an object that big and heavy roaring through the air, to say nothing for all the feathery touch. It's like ball golf, but in totally 3D. It's just a better.
And there's no extra leverage. There's no the extra leverage of the club. It's like, yeah, their biomechanics are pretty clean, but they've got this whole like tool that they're using, and that's what I've always felt. It's fascinating about disc golf. It's like there's no extra leverage. Like it's a martial art. They're just going through this motion, and then the disc is just ripping. Like, is there a sport that compares, Brian? Like
nothing. There's
is
nothing
disc golf near the top, like the baseball pitch, maybe. and being
No,
able to
not even
get, you know,
close.
95 mile per hour like sinker.
But you're nowhere near it. You can't be anywhere near that. You're way back in the stands. There's no comprehension of the speed or the velocity of the energy. The fact that disc golf, like you can watch Eagle McMahon release an 86-mile-an-hour roller over your head on hole 2 at Milo, and the thing roars over your head like a jet plane. You hear the air like vibrating off of it. If you're close to those guys, you know, it's like the muzzle of a gun. It's incredible. Or you see someone like Simon, where Simon somehow lets the disc go at exactly the right amount of pressure. Getting back to that like Ricky analogy, whisper quiet off of his fingers and coming out over 80 miles an hour sometimes, roaring through the air like a jet. Like there's nothing like that in any other sport at all. So disc golf is going through this renaissance again. I talked about this a ton in the videos. I basically said that I think one of the things that's holding the sport back in a way from the mainstream is the inaccessibility of the form. There are a lot of people who are avid golf fans and they play golf every day or a good amount of the time, because you can be a pretty damn decent ball golfer because, like you said, guess what? You got a giant ass metal lever to swing to hit a tiny little ball. So anybody with decent mechanics can hit a golf ball pretty far, but you can't throw a golf disc correctly without good mechanics, particularly if you are like not a young athletic kid. And a lot of people are like, yeah, I go out to the park and I throw the disc 160 feet. And it's like, why am I even doing this? It feels pointless after a while. What if they could throw 300 on a laser beam with a mid or something? You know, like how different is the sport? I think that it has the potential to be enormous. And having people like you two guys involved and all the countless tens of thousands of people who support and grow the sport every single day, and all of the teachers and all the mentors, all the certainly the fan base, you know, everybody, like it's such an amazing egalitarian sport. It's the thing I've loved about it from the very beginning. It's so accessible, and unlike traditional golf, it doesn't degrade the environment at all. It integrates into the environment. You modify the course to fit the landscape, not the other way around. And in fact, the more modified the landscape, generally the better the game is too. So it encourages conservation of natural spaces and gets people outdoors, you know, in the wild. It's just that it's way more fun when you know what you're doing. Birdies are more fun than bogeys.
Sure.
All birdies, no bogeys. It's the name of
all birdies.
All birdies. Yeah,
exactly.
So your platform is free right now, Brian. The method. Where can people find that? You've referenced it a bit. It's on YouTube. You have your own website. Where can people find it?
I managed to grab a really cool URL for it actually that happened to be available. LearnDiscGolf.com is the website for the project. And I tried to promote it a little bit on Reddit a couple years ago, and I was met with a really, really kind of hostile response. I think it's because I did not do a good job of framing it. I intend to go back there to put up a post probably after this podcast goes live to let people know about that, because it's a big community. And the docuseries is essentially what it is called The Method. And it's right now in 2 parts. It's on both the LearnDiscGolf.com website. Also, all the individual videos are on my YouTube channel. And on top of that, I've been producing a lot of really popular content lately that is form analysis in 2 different parts. I have pro form analysis. So, for example, the latest pro form was Calvin, conveniently the day after he won the last event. And somehow that video has climbed its way up to like 76,000 views, which is insane. But there's a bunch of other reviews of pro form and really focusing on pros that are different in important ways. And also something that's probably more applicable to the audience, honestly, I'm doing amateur form reviews where people generally come to me either through the website. Honestly, I've found most of the people on Reddit just by messaging them and essentially cold calling them after they post a form review, and I'm like, hey, you know, your form's really interesting. I'd be happy to give you some advice. I make a video for them, usually 10, 12 minutes long. And I explain to them exactly what they are doing wrong in their form, because I have embodied it at some point in my 25-year arc, guaranteed. And I know exactly what is causing them to feel that way. I know exactly what body positions are producing that result. More importantly, I know how to remedy them. And based on the little I generally know about them from looking at their athleticism, sometimes they'll tell me a little bit about their sports background. I can make a specific diagnosis because it is not a one size fits all thing, unfortunately. That's where the big coaching part comes out. So I'm objectively pretty good at this stuff, and there are a bunch of other people in this ecosystem who are also actively working every single day to improve other players. As the boat continues to rise, more and more people will understand the mechanics in a way that they can communicate, and it will continue to propagate. And then, good players can actually teach their parents or their children how to play, and the sport will continue to grow. So I would love for that to be a reality. I view disc golf as the perfect sport for the 21st century. Its blending of the natural and science is also unparalleled. It's just so remarkable as a thing. And it's getting solved, which is the key here. It's feeling like an increasingly solved system. As soon as it's a solved system, guess what? Everyone can pile on board. And I think that will continue to grow and elevate it. I could honestly foresee a future where it is competitive with some of the big major sports. I would love to help contribute to that and facilitate it in whatever way I can, given my time as an active game designer.
All right. Man, what a treat to have you, Brian.
You guys are so awesome. It's such incredible. Honestly, the questions that you guys both come up with, it's like, as you're saying them, I'm like, yep, that is exactly the right time to ask this question. Sequentially.
Appreciate that.
Well, I mean, you're both such masterful broadcasters, seriously. And the skill is, at least as best I understand it, I've done a lot of broadcasting, is that you being able to understand not only what the host is saying, but also what is the audience thinking right now? What are they wondering? I need to ask that question, even though I already know the answer to it, because I'm sure you do. You both would have wonderful answers for any of the questions you ask.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Brian. I appreciate that. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure this is not the last time we'll talk disc golf with you in the lifespan of this show. I'm down. Let's nerd out off camera sometime. I'm always all ears for that. But with that, I want to say thank you for your time, and we will see you out there next time.
Such a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. And I really look forward to talking again.
Well, Nate, I think in the introduction, you mentioned that this was going to be a very in-depth conversation, and we got it. And I think he was exactly as you described. And the thing to me that makes me happy is the infectious passion for disc golf. And I think we need optimistic people like him in disc golf, trying to do things just for the sake of doing them. And I love any coach. He actually reminds me a lot of Mike Strauss from the Chicagoland area. Another guy that's been in disc golf a long time, never played a PDGA event, was just so fascinated with the flight of a disc and making it fly that he spent his whole life just figuring it out and learning how to teach it to other people. And Brian Weissman is no different, and I enjoyed it. What do you take away from the conversation that we just had with him?
Well, I really didn't understand before his history. I thought that was fascinating. That I thought that he got into it a little later and was already looking at YouTube and was just fascinated with the backhand form from afar. I didn't realize that it was his own personal quest, and that he's starting in SoCal. He's seeing players like Bobby Lewis and Steve Rico. So I think the way that he's kind of tied into the history of coaching in general and the players that the Seabass captain mentioned over on the East Coast, I think that aspect of it is fascinating. And then again, what fascinated me about him to begin with was talking about the algorithm and how to use different parts of the throw to actually coach your brain and to override your brain. Because I think that understanding the throw is one thing, but actually like absorbing it yourself or getting someone else to absorb it and actually get their body to do what they're supposed to do, that's the hardest part, right? Like that's the mountain in this. And so I think that he's really onto something with using, like, say, the left leg and the squishing of the left leg to be able to learn how to brace rather than focusing on the right leg. I think that part is something that other coaches are going to use in the future. It's certainly been a way that I've been able to help myself, like, really drive that brace leg down. And yeah, he's just, like you said, the i- infectious, like, attitude that he has about how special the game is. I relate to that in such a strong way. The way that he talked about PGA and the golf swing. I really do feel that there's not much like the disc golf swing. And so to see someone in their 50s act like a little kid talking about keeping a disc on plane, it's just really cool. And yeah, I hope our fans enjoyed this show, Brian.
Well, we got the Match Play Championships coming up next weekend at Hornets Nest. Course looks beautiful. Gorgeous time of year to be out there at Hornets Nest. I'm going to be on course commentary, actually. I was originally going to be in the booth. Yeah, me and Germ were originally going to be in the booth together, but then my house flooded where the studio is. So I'm going to be on course now. And then Germ is going to be in the booth with Grant Zellner, I believe. But yeah, I'll be walking around. I saw Ezra Aderhold out there today. I was just getting a few holes in before we started the show. And yeah, he seems excited to be out here. And I'm off to the Hornets game. It's disc golf night. And I'm going to go out there and mingle with some disc golfers from the Charlotte area and watch the Hornets lose. Brandon Miller and Melo Ball, you guys better get healthy very quick. You're stranding your rookies out there on the floor. Maybe this is by design. I don't know. Please don't tank again. That's going to do it for the All Birdies, No Bogeys podcast. For Brian Earhart, Nate Perkins, good night, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know when you watch the show.
See you next week.